I never thought my life would take such a turn. When I first stepped into that gym, it felt like any other decision I had made to get my life back on track. I was Emily Johnson, a 32-year-old working mother of two, juggling a demanding job, a crumbling marriage, and the constant feeling that somewhere along the way, I'd lost myself. The gym was pristine, its glass walls giving a panoramic view of the bustling city below. I felt small walking in, overwhelmed by the confident strides of others who seemed to belong there. Then I saw him, Luke Carter, the lead trainer. He was the kind of man who exuded charisma effortlessly. His smile was warm but sharp, his presence magnetic. When he walked up to introduce himself, I couldn't help but feel like he saw right through me. "You're Emily, right?" he said, glancing at his tablet. "Corporate professional, looking to make some time for yourself. Am I close?" I nodded, surprised by how easily he summed me up. He chuckled and motioned toward the equipment. "Let's get started. We'll build a program that's just for you. One step at a time." The first session was straightforward: stretches, light cardio, and weights. But it was his words, not the workout, that lingered with me. "You deserve more than what you're settling for," he said casually as I struggled with a set. I looked up, unsure how to respond. Did he mean my form? My efforts? Or something deeper? His gaze held mine for just a moment too long, leaving me both intrigued and unsettled. Later that night, I found myself replaying that moment in my head. Jason, my husband, was sitting on the couch scrolling through his phone, barely noticing when I came home. Our conversations had become routine exchanges about bills, schedules, and the kids. The spark we once had was now buried under years of complacency and unspoken frustrations. The next day, I returned to the gym. Luke greeted me with that same confident smile. "Back for more?" he teased, adjusting the weights for my routine. As the sessions went on, I began to open up more than I had expected. He was easy to talk to, asking questions about my job, my passions, and even my childhood dreams. There was something disarming about him, something that made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. By the third session, his comments started to feel more personal. "You've got so much potential," he said, leaning slightly closer than necessary as he adjusted my form. "You just need to stop holding yourself back." It wasn't just his words, it was the way he said them, with an intensity that made my stomach flutter. I shook off the feeling, telling myself it was nothing. But deep down, I knew better. One evening, after an especially grueling session, Luke walked me to the exit. "You're stronger than you think, Emily," he said, his voice softer than usual. "Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." There it was again, that piercing gaze that seemed to cut through all my defenses. I nodded, mumbling a thank you before walking out into the crisp night air. But just as I was unlocking my car, I felt his presence behind me. "Wait," he called out, his tone more urgent now. I turned, my heart racing. "If you ever want to push past your limits, let me know. I've got a setup at my place that could really help you. No distractions, just focus." I stared at him, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts. This was crossing a line, wasn't it? But then again, wasn't I the one who'd been craving something, anything, to feel alive again? "I'll think about it," I finally replied, my voice barely above a whisper. He smiled, a knowing smile that sent a shiver down my spine, and walked back into the gym. As I drove home, Jason was already asleep when I got in. The house was quiet, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I stood in the kitchen, staring at my reflection in the window. Who was I becoming? And why did I feel like I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't fully comprehend? The thought of Luke's offer lingered in my mind, pulling me into a restless night. Little did I know, that simple proposition would mark the beginning of a journey that would unravel everything I thought I knew about myself and my life. After a restless night, I found myself standing in front of the gym once more. The memory of Luke's words clung to me like an unresolved question. "You deserve more than what you're settling for," he had said, his voice lingering in my mind. I shook off the thought and pushed the doors open, determined to focus on myself, not him. "Emily." Right on time, Luke greeted me with his signature smile. It was infuriating how effortless his charm seemed. Today, we're upping the intensity. You ready? I nodded, though inside, I wasn't sure. We moved through the exercises, and I couldn't help but notice how attuned he was to every detail, my posture, my breathing, even my expressions. You've got this, he'd say, and for a moment, I'd believe him. As the session went on, our conversations shifted. What started as casual small talk grew deeper. Luke's questions felt pointed, like he genuinely wanted to understand me. What do you do to unwind? He asked, holding the weight steady as I struggled through a set. I laughed bitterly. Unwind? Between work, kids, and everything else, I'm lucky if I can sit down with a glass of wine before bed. Sounds exhausting, he said, his tone empathetic but firm. You've got to carve out time for yourself. You can't pour from an empty cup. His words struck a chord. It was something I'd heard before but never truly internalized. Before I knew it, I found myself sharing more than I intended about Jason, our fading connection, and the monotony of a life that once felt so vibrant. Luke listened without interrupting, his gaze steady and unjudging. When I finished, he leaned back against the wall, arms crossed. You know, Emily, it's not just about physical strength. You've got to strengthen the parts of you that the world has worn down. The parts that make you, you. I looked away, unsure how to respond. His words felt both inspiring and unnervingly personal. But before I could dwell on it, he clapped his hands together. All right, back to work. No slacking on my watch. The session ended, but the conversation didn't leave me. That night, as I lay in bed, Jason beside me scrolling through his phone, I thought about how easy it had been to talk to Luke. How he made me feel heard, even when I didn't have the words to explain myself. The next day, I found a message waiting for me. Great work today. Let's take it to the next level next time. You've got potential, Emily. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. I stared at the message, conflicted. Part of me wanted to delete it, to pretend it didn't matter. But another part, the part that felt invisible at home, wanted to believe him. When I arrived for the next session, Luke's energy was different. More focused, more intense. Today, we're breaking barriers, he announced, his eyes locking onto mine. No excuses. As we worked through the routine, he started tailoring the exercises in ways that felt deeply personal. This one's for when you're carrying the weight of the world, he'd say, or push through, like you're breaking free from everything holding you back. It was as if he could see the invisible burdens I carried. By the end of the session, I was exhausted but strangely exhilarated. You're doing amazing, he said as we finished. You're stronger than you think, Emily. You just need the right environment to grow. Then he paused, as if considering something. Listen, he said, lowering his voice. I've got some equipment at home that's perfect for what you need. If you're serious about this, we can schedule a private session. No distractions, just focus. I hesitated. The idea felt risky, even inappropriate. But there was something in his tone, a challenge, an invitation, that made it hard to say no. I'll think about it, I said finally, avoiding his gaze. His smile was knowing, as if he already had my answer. Take your time. When you're ready to take the next step, let me know. As I walked to my car, his words echoed in my mind. This wasn't just about fitness anymore. It was about something deeper, something I wasn't sure I was ready to face. That night, I found myself staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. Who was I becoming? And why did the idea of taking that next step both terrify and thrill me? Standing outside Luke's house, I hesitated. My breath caught as I stared at the sleek, modern exterior. The walls of glass offered glimpses into a space that seemed designed for intensity and focus. I had told myself 100 times that this was just another session, another step towards self-improvement. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't about fitness anymore. It was about control, validation, and something I wasn't ready to name. The door opened before I could knock. Luke stood there in a fitted athletic shirt and joggers, his ever-present confidence making the air feel heavier. Emily, he said, his smile sharp as a blade. Come in. Let's get started. The interior was a reflection of him, minimalistic yet purposeful. A state-of-the-art home gym dominated the space, its polished equipment gleaming under soft overhead lights. It felt intimate, too intimate. I gripped my water bottle tighter, the weight of the decision to be here pressing on my chest. "Relax," Luke said, reading me as easily as he always did. "This is your time. No distractions, no limits." The session began like any other, with warm-ups and stretches. But the atmosphere was different. Luke's voice seemed softer, yet each word carried an edge that cut straight through me. "Push harder. You're stronger than this," he murmured, his hands hovering near my waist as I balanced on the Bosa ball. As the minutes turned into an hour, our conversation took a familiar turn, away from fitness and toward life. He asked about Jason, and I gave the usual, guarded answers. But then he said something that made me freeze mid-rep. "Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" I put the weights down, my breath shallow. "What do you mean?" "Like you've built this version of yourself that fits what everyone else expects. And in doing that, you've lost the version that made you, you." His eyes locked onto mine, searching for something I wasn't sure I wanted to reveal. I swallowed hard, my pulse racing. "Sometimes," I admitted, barely above a whisper. Luke stepped closer, his voice low and deliberate. "You deserve to feel alive again, Emily. To remember who you are." The room seemed to shrink, the walls pressing in. I wanted to leave, to end this before it went further, but my feet stayed planted. It was as if he had reached into a part of me I had buried long ago and brought it gasping to the surface. "That's enough for today," I said abruptly, grabbing my towel. I avoided his gaze as I headed for the door, but he moved faster, his hand brushing my arm. "Wait," he said, his tone softer now. "Emily, I didn't mean to push. I see so much potential in you, and it frustrates me to see you hold back. From life, from everything." The sincerity in his voice was disarming. Against my better judgment, I paused, turning to face him. His hand reached up, brushing a strand of hair from my face. It was a fleeting touch, but it lingered like an aftershock. "You're stronger than you think," he whispered. "Never forget that." I pulled away, my heart pounding. "I need to go," I said, my voice shaking. Luke didn't stop me this time. He simply nodded, his expression unreadable. "Take care, Emily. I'll see you soon." Driving home, I replayed the moment over and over in my mind. The way his hand lingered, the intensity in his eyes. It was wrong, all of it. But as I pulled into my driveway and saw Jason's car parked where it always was, a wave of something else washed over me. Guilt, yes. But also, a flicker of exhilaration. That night, as Jason told me about his day, I nodded in all the right places, but barely heard a word. My mind was elsewhere, trapped in the memory of Luke's touch and the question he had asked, the one I couldn't shake. "Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" The answer was yes. And I wasn't sure I could stop myself from chasing the one I thought I had lost. I can't stop thinking about him. The way he looks at me. The way he makes me feel like I'm more than just a wife and mother. There's a danger in this, I know it. But every moment we've spent together, every word he's spoken, it lingers with me. Jason doesn't notice yet. He's too caught up in his work, too distracted by his own stresses. But I'm slipping, and it scares me. The messages from Luke keep coming. At first, it was about my fitness, about pushing myself harder. But now, they're different. There's something about them that makes me uneasy, but I can't seem to stop reading them. Last night, I received another message from Luke. It was late, too late. I should have ignored it, should have deleted it without a second thought. But I didn't. Instead, I opened it. "Do you ever think about taking risks that could change your life forever?" I stared at the screen, my heart racing. What was I supposed to say? I could feel the temptation tugging at me. A small voice inside whispered that it wasn't too late, that I deserved more. I didn't respond. But I couldn't bring myself to delete it either, not immediately. Eventually, I hit delete. But the words, they stayed. The next morning, Jason could sense something was wrong. He doesn't know what it is, but he's noticed the distance between us. The way I look at him differently, like I'm not really here, not fully present. I want to tell him everything, but I can't. I don't know how to explain the feeling that's grown inside me. I'm scared of what will happen if I do. He keeps asking me, pressing me, wanting to know what's going on in my head. but I can't tell him the truth. The truth is, I don't know who I am anymore. I keep imagining what it would be like to be with Luke, to feel the energy between us again. I told myself I was only going to work out and get in shape. But it's becoming so much more than that. And I hate myself for wanting it. Jason has no idea, and part of me wants to scream and beg him to notice. But then I remember Luke's words, how he said I deserved more. And for a moment, I believe him. I try to push it away, bury it under my responsibilities. But every time I go back to the gym, I can feel him watching me. And when I'm there, it's like nothing else matters. I can't stop it. I don't know how to stop it. And every message, every glance, every word pulls me deeper into this web of temptation. I try to tell myself it's harmless, that it's just an infatuation, but I know it's more than that. Jason is growing more concerned. He asks if I'm all right. I say I'm fine, but I'm not. I can feel the cracks forming, the distance widening between us. And all the while, Luke's messages continue to blur the lines between what's real and what's not. Then last night, after a particularly long day at work, I received a message that made my stomach twist. It wasn't a casual text this time. It wasn't about fitness or motivation. It was something else, something that felt dangerous. Luke's message said, "I know you're trying to ignore it, but you can't. You're mine now." The words sent chills through me. And in that moment, I knew. I wasn't just an exercise project for him. I wasn't just a client. He was after something far deeper, something darker. I couldn't delete that one. I couldn't get rid of it, not this time. What do I do now? I don't know. I'm trapped. And I can feel it getting worse. I feel like I'm losing control, like the person I thought I was slipping away, piece by piece. But there's no turning back. I know that now. And the worst part is, I don't know if I even want to. I can't stop thinking about him. That moment at the fitness event when he leaned in. I didn't pull away fast enough. And now I can't erase it from my mind. It wasn't just a kiss. It felt like something else. Something darker, more intoxicating. I thought maybe I could brush it off, tell myself it was a mistake, that I was just caught up in the excitement. But deep down, I know it wasn't. The lie I told Jason about the conference still weighs on me. He had no idea where I really was. I was so thrilled when Luke invited me. There was this feeling inside me, like I was breaking free, like I was alive in a way I hadn't been in years. It felt like a secret, and there was power in that secret. But the guilt is suffocating. I can't look Jason in the eyes without feeling it. And every time my phone buzzes with a message from Luke, it's like a needle of desire, a sharp jolt that pulls me back into the web I'm desperately trying to escape. Luke's texts haven't stopped. At first, it was motivating. But now they feel personal. Too personal. Too much. He's starting to invade my every thought. Yesterday, I got one that made my heart stop. Do you really think you can go back to how things were? Once you know what's possible, there's no unknowing it. I wanted to delete it. I wanted to tell myself I could ignore him. But I couldn't. I sat there staring at the words, knowing they were true. There's no going back now. There's no pretending that nothing happened between us. There's no pretending that I don't want it to happen again. Jason doesn't know any of this. He thinks I'm just stressed, that I'm tired from work. He doesn't see me anymore. He doesn't see how I've changed. The way Luke makes me feel is something Jason can't give me, and I hate myself for even admitting that. But I can't deny it. The trip, the kiss, it all lingers. It haunts me. I'm spinning, lost between two worlds. One where I'm the good wife, the good mother, and the other where I'm something else entirely. A woman who's learning what it feels like to be desired, to be seen. Luke wants more, I can feel it. His words, the way he looks at me, it's like he's waiting for me to say yes. And part of me wants to. But another part of me is terrified. Terrified of what will happen if I do. I've never felt this alive. But I've never felt this lost either. There's only one thing I know for sure, I'm on the edge, and I don't know how far I'm willing to fall. But I'm getting closer to the point of no return. And the worst part? I think Luke knows that too. The flight back home felt endless. My mind was racing, replaying everything that had happened. The kiss, the tension, the overwhelming guilt. I could feel Jason's absence, even though he was at home waiting for me. I wanted to act normal. I wanted to believe I could just slip back into my life like nothing had changed, like the secret I was carrying didn't exist. But it was suffocating. Jason barely said a word when I walked through the door. He was tired, distracted, too wrapped up in his own life. He didn't suspect anything, or maybe he didn't want to. I tried to smile, tried to ease the tension, but inside I felt like a stranger in my own skin. My phone buzzed, and for a moment I froze. Luke's name flashed across the screen. I ignored it. It didn't matter. I told myself I had to focus on my family, that I needed to stay away from him. But that was easier said than done. Over the next few days, I did everything I could to avoid Luke. I skipped sessions, ignored his texts, and pretended to be busy with work. But no matter how hard I tried, the feeling didn't go away. His words kept echoing in my head. You deserve more than this. More than Jason, more than this life. Was it possible to be so consumed by temptation that I didn't even recognize myself anymore? Then it happened. The message I didn't want to see. You can run, but you can't hide from the truth. Luke's words were like a dark promise, one that I knew I couldn't ignore. The truth? What truth? What was he even talking about? I thought I could outrun him, but he wasn't going to let me go that easily. Jason noticed I was pulling away, becoming more distant. He tried to reach out, but I couldn't let him in. I couldn't let him see the cracks forming inside of me. But then it happened. I was sitting at my desk when my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Jason. You left your phone in the kitchen. I found a message from Luke. What's going on, Emily? My heart stopped. I didn't even know what to say. I had no excuse, no way to deny what was happening. I felt exposed, like my entire world was collapsing in front of me. Jason confronted me later that night. He was calm at first, too calm. I could tell he wasn't just angry, he was hurt. What's going on, Emily? Who is he? Why are you lying to me? I tried to deny everything. I tried to make him believe it was just training, just work. But the more I spoke, the more I realized how hollow my words sounded. I could see the doubt in Jason's eyes. He didn't believe me, and I couldn't blame him. And then came the twist. As if everything wasn't already unraveling fast enough, Luke sent me one final message. A voice message. It was unsettling, haunting. He said, you can lie to him, but you can't lie to yourself. You'll never be able to escape what's happening between us, Emily. I felt trapped. Luke knew things about me I hadn't even shared. He knew my deepest insecurities, my desires, my frustrations. How could he know all of that without me even saying a word? I thought I was in control, that I could handle this, but I was wrong. I was already too deep, and I was starting to lose myself. My marriage was hanging by a thread, and the only thing that kept me going was the promise that Luke wasn't going to let me go. But then, just when I thought I had reached the breaking point, Jason found something else. A clue. A piece of evidence. And that's when everything started to spiral out of control. The web I had tangled myself in was about to snap. And I had no idea what would happen next. Stay tuned, because the next part of this story is going to blow your mind. I thought I was done. I really did. I had promised myself that I would end things with Luke. I even deleted his number from my phone and avoided his messages. The guilt from the kiss, the one I had never meant to happen, but had let happen anyway, was eating me up inside. I couldn't look at Jason the same way, knowing that I had crossed a line. I couldn't bear the thought of what I'd done. But then, one afternoon, as I sat at my desk at work, my heart stopped. Luke. He was standing in the lobby, his eyes scanning the crowd, but I knew. I knew he was here for me. I felt a cold shiver run through me as I watched him walk toward me. He was so calm, so collected, as if he had all the time in the world. And me? I was panicking. Every step he took felt like it was crushing me under the weight of everything I had tried to forget. Emily, he said, his voice low and smooth. We need to talk. I didn't even have a chance to speak before he was leading me toward the elevator. I pulled away. No, this has to end. But Luke wasn't listening. He was too close now, too much in control. You think you can just walk away from me? From this? he asked, his voice now barely a whisper, but full of tension. I'm not going anywhere, Emily. And you know you don't want me to. I wanted to scream. I wanted to push him away and run, but something inside me kept me rooted to the spot. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was desire. I don't know anymore. I didn't have a choice. I couldn't run. Not now. He leaned in closer, his breath warm on my ear, making me shiver. If you don't meet me tonight, I'll tell your husband everything. Every little detail of our sessions. His voice was like a velvet trap. I think he'd like to know how close we've gotten. His words hit me like a slap. No, I whispered, more to myself than to him. But I knew I couldn't back out now. Jason would never forgive me. He would leave me. I could feel it in my bones. I was trapped. Meet me at the cafe, Luke said, his words final. Just one last time. And we can both walk away, or we can see where this goes. But make no mistake, Emily. You're not free yet. I wanted to protest, but I couldn't. I had no more fight left. I was drowning. That night, I lied to Jason. Again. I told him I had to work late. I couldn't even look him in the eyes as I said it. He didn't question me, which only made the guilt worse. I knew it was wrong, but at that moment, I felt like I had no other option. When I arrived at the cafe, my heart was racing. I tried to breathe through it to calm myself, but nothing worked. Not when I saw Luke sitting in the corner, waiting for me. He didn't even have to look up. He just knew I was there. His eyes locked onto mine immediately, a knowing look. I felt a chill run through me. Sit down, Emily, he said calmly, as if everything was normal. We need to finish this. It's not over. I didn't sit. I couldn't. But he didn't seem to care. Slowly, he stood up, walked over to me, and took my arm, guiding me to the table. I felt a jolt of panic, but at the same time, a part of me didn't want to pull away. I was too far gone, too deep into this mess. You've been avoiding me, he said softly, his fingers brushing against mine as I reluctantly sat. I don't like being ignored, Emily. It makes me do things I don't want to do. What are you talking about? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. You're not fooling anyone, he replied, his voice low and serious. I know you've been feeling something. You know it too. My pulse quickened. I wanted to deny it, to say that I was in control of everything. But deep down, I knew I wasn't. I had let it go too far. I tried to stand up, to leave, but Luke grabbed my wrist, holding me in place. You think you can just walk away, don't you? He whispered, his voice dangerously close. You've been running from me for days now, but I know you're not done. You know you're not done. I pulled my arm away from his grip, my heart hammering in my chest. This needs to end now, Luke. His eyes flashed with something I couldn't quite understand. It was something dark, something possessive. I don't think you understand, he said, his smile cold. You don't get to walk away from this. Not unless I say so. The words hit me like a slap, and for the first time, I realized how deep this was. How deep Luke was. He wasn't just a trainer anymore. He wasn't just some guy I had made a mistake with. He was controlling me, manipulating me, and I didn't know how to stop it. As I sat there, trying to pull my thoughts together, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. A figure approaching from the door. I froze. My heart skipped a beat. It was a colleague of mine, someone who had seen us together at the gym a few weeks ago. She walked past our table, her eyes flicking between me and Luke. And for just a second, her gaze lingered on mine, a look of suspicion in her eyes. She didn't say anything, but I could tell she knew something was off. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. When she left, I turned back to Luke, but the fear I felt wasn't just from the situation we were in, it was the realization that I was on the edge. If Jason found out, if anyone found out, this was all going to fall apart. Emily, Luke said, his voice quiet and controlled. You've been avoiding me, but you're not getting away from this. You never will. I stood up, my mind spinning. I have to go. But as I turned to leave, Luke's voice followed me. Think about it, Emily. You think you can just walk away. But you can't. You're mine now. You'll never be free. The weight of his words settled into me, and for the first time, I wasn't sure if I could get out of this. As I left the cafe, I realized just how far I had fallen into Luke's web. And I didn't know how to escape. It was only the beginning of the end. But what Luke didn't know was that I had a secret of my own. Stay tuned. It's about to get even crazier. I had always thought I could control this. I thought that I could distance myself from Luke, stop answering his texts, avoid his calls, and somehow this would all just fade away. But it didn't. It was worse than I could have imagined. Jason's suspicions were growing. I could see it in his eyes every time we spoke. He knew something was wrong. I couldn't hide it from him anymore, no matter how hard I tried. He wasn't stupid. I was becoming more distant, more distracted, and even when I tried to explain myself, it didn't seem to help. One night, after dinner, Jason sat across from me at the kitchen table, his eyes locked onto mine, a hard edge to his voice. "Emily, I know you're hiding something. What's going on? You've been acting strange lately." The air felt thick around us. I knew exactly what he was talking about. Luke. I could feel the tension in the room, like a weight pressing down on my chest. My heart raced. I couldn't let Jason find out the truth. Not now. Not after everything. "I'm just stressed, Jason. Work's been crazy, and I'm trying to juggle everything." "You know how it is," I lied, my voice trembling. But Jason wasn't buying it. His face softened, but the concern was still there. "I don't know, Emily. You've been different. I don't want to push you, but I need to know what's going on." I could see the doubt in his eyes, and it was killing me. I could lie, tell him that nothing was going on, but deep down, I knew that wasn't true. I was caught in a web of my own making, and I couldn't get out. But the worst part? Luke was still there, lurking in the background. And things were about to get much, much worse. The next morning, when I checked my phone, I saw the new messages. They weren't the motivational texts I had gotten used to from Luke. No, these were different. Darker. The first one read, "I know what you're doing. Don't think I won't expose you." My stomach turned. I knew exactly what he meant. He was threatening me. Again, this wasn't just about the training anymore. It wasn't just about our chemistry or the moments we shared. Luke was playing a game, one I didn't want to be a part of, but I couldn't escape it. I tried to ignore it, to go about my day like nothing had happened, but the fear was suffocating me. Every little thing felt like a trap, like I was walking on eggshells, just waiting for the other shoe to drop. And then it did. Later that afternoon, as I was sitting in my office, I heard my phone buzz again. It was Luke. He had left a voicemail. I didn't even listen to it at first. I didn't want to hear what he had to say. But curiosity, fear, and something else I couldn't name made me open the message. His voice was low, almost a whisper, but it felt like he was right there beside me. "I know you're still hiding from me, Emily. I see everything. Don't think you can get away with it. You're mine now, whether you like it or not." The words sent a chill through me. How did he know? How did he always know where I was, what I was doing? I felt my hands tremble as I held the phone. I deleted the message, but the fear lingered. Luke wasn't just some personal trainer anymore. He wasn't just someone I could walk away from. He had become something much darker, something I couldn't escape. And then it hit me. I had underestimated him. I thought I could control the situation, that I could stop seeing him and everything would go back to normal. But Luke wasn't like anyone I had ever dealt with. He was manipulative, calculating, and relentless. And I had no idea how far he was willing to go to get what he wanted. But the worst part? I didn't know how far I was willing to let him take me. A few days later, I was driving home when I saw something that made my blood run cold. A black car was parked across the street from my house. The windows were tinted, but I could feel someone watching me. My heart raced as I tried to shake the feeling off. I knew it was Luke. It had to be. I had no proof, but deep down I knew. I rushed inside the house, locked the door behind me, and tried to push the fear out of my mind. But it was impossible. Every little sound, every shadow, made me jump. I couldn't escape the feeling that I was being watched. That night, Jason and I tried to have a quiet evening, but I couldn't focus on anything. Every time I heard a noise, my heart would skip a beat. I kept expecting Luke to show up, to confront me, to make things even worse than they already were. And then it happened. Jason had stepped out to grab something from the car when I saw it, a message from Luke. My stomach dropped as I read it. "You really think you can hide from me, Emily? I'm always watching." The message sent a wave of panic through me. I couldn't breathe. Luke knew everything. He knew where I lived. He knew where I worked. He knew everything about me. And he wasn't going to stop until he had complete control. I tried to hide it from Jason, but it was getting harder and harder. The pressure was too much. I couldn't keep lying to him. The truth was right there, staring me in the face, and I couldn't run from it any longer. The next morning, I woke up to something that nearly made my heart stop. A package was sitting on the doorstep. I hadn't seen anyone deliver it. My first instinct was to ignore it, but the curiosity, the fear, it was too much. I opened the package, and inside was a single photograph. It was from the fitness event Luke and I had attended, the one where everything had gone too far. The one where we had shared that kiss. The photograph was taken from a distance, capturing me and Luke standing too close together, our faces blurred, but unmistakable. My heart dropped as I read the note that came with it. "This isn't over, Emily." Not by a long shot. I felt a wave of panic wash over me. It was like a slap to the face, a reminder that I was trapped. Luke wasn't done with me. He was still out there, still pulling the strings, and I didn't know how to get away. I felt the weight of my choices crashing down on me. I had let it get this far. I had let Luke in, let him manipulate me, and now I was paying the price. But Jason, he didn't know. Not yet. And I couldn't let him find out. Not like this. Everything I had worked so hard to keep together was falling apart. What was Luke going to do next? Stay tuned, because what comes next will change everything. I had always thought I could keep my life under control. I thought that I could play by the rules, hide my mistakes, and protect the people I loved from the consequences of my own actions. But I was wrong. I thought that the worst was over. That after everything with Luke, after all the lies and the guilt, I could finally return to normal. But the truth was, I had never been more trapped. Luke wasn't letting me go. And worse, he was pushing me further into a corner, playing his twisted game with the precision of someone who had nothing left to lose. The voicemails, the cryptic messages, the threats, they had all started to blur together, making me feel like I was suffocating. But what truly terrified me was the way Luke seemed to know everything about me. Every time I thought I had escaped, he found me. Jason, bless him, was still holding on, even though I could see the cracks in our marriage widening. I had confessed to him everything I had done with Luke, every wrong step I had taken. I had begged for forgiveness, but no amount of words could undo the damage. No amount of tears could erase the doubt that now clouded his eyes. "Emily, you have to understand. I love you, but I can't keep pretending that nothing happened. You've been lying to me for so long, and I don't know who to believe anymore. I don't know if I can trust you again." His words cut deeper than anything Luke had ever said. But I deserved it. I deserved the heartbreak, the betrayal. I had betrayed him first. The days after my confession were a blur. Jason and I barely spoke. It was like we were two strangers, living in the same house, but trapped in our own worlds. I couldn't escape the guilt, and he couldn't escape the hurt. And then, Luke's grip on me tightened even more. I started receiving text messages from him again, each one more threatening than the last. He had promised me that he wasn't done, but I hadn't expected it to be this bad. I had hoped, foolishly, that he would let go, that he would find someone else to torment. But that wasn't Luke's style. He wanted control. He wanted me, and he wasn't about to stop until he had it. The message I received that day made my blood run cold. It was simple, but the words echoed in my mind, drowning out everything else. "If you don't come to me, I'll make sure Jason knows everything. I'll make sure your whole life crumbles." I had been running from the truth for so long, trying to protect my family, protect my marriage, but now I realized how much damage I had already done. There was no escaping Luke. He knew everything, and if I didn't comply, I would lose everything. I felt like I was at my breaking point. I couldn't go back, but I couldn't keep moving forward either. The fear was consuming me, and the weight of it all felt unbearable. Jason, of course, could see that something was wrong. I had been distant, retreating into myself, always checking my phone, my eyes constantly searching for any sign of Luke's presence. He asked me about the messages, about the things I had been hiding, but I couldn't bring myself to tell him the full truth. I couldn't bring myself to destroy what little we had left. But the more I tried to keep him out, the more Jason pulled me in. He confronted me once more, his eyes filled with frustration and pain. "I'm done with the lies, Emily. If you don't tell me the truth, I won't be able to forgive you. I won't be able to look at you the same way." The words hit me like a slap. I couldn't lie to him anymore. Not when everything was already falling apart. I broke down in front of him, my voice trembling as I confessed everything. I told him about Luke, about the moments we had shared, about the hold he had on me. The guilt and shame weighed me down, but I knew I had to come clean. I couldn't keep hiding from the truth any longer. Jason was silent for what felt like an eternity, his face unreadable. And then, finally, he spoke. "I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. I feel like you've broken something inside me, Emily. I don't know if I can trust you again." His words were like a dagger to my heart. I had known that this was coming, but hearing it from him, the man I had promised to love and cherish, shattered me. But there was no time to wallow in the pain. Luke wasn't going to wait for me to fix things. He was already making his next move. Jason and I made the decision to confront Luke. We couldn't keep running from him, couldn't keep living in fear. It was time to face the man who had torn our lives apart and take back control. But when we found him, I realized just how much danger we were in. Luke's apartment was as sleek and clean as I remembered, but there was a coldness to it now. He didn't greet us with the same charm that had once drawn me in. This time, his eyes were filled with something far darker. "You finally decided to show up," Luke said, his voice dripping with malice. "It's too late, you know. You can't undo what's already been done." Jason stepped forward, his anger barely contained. "I'm not here for your games, Luke. We're done with you. You're not going to ruin our lives anymore." Luke's smile was unsettling. "You think you're in control? You think you can just walk away from this? You've underestimated me, Emily. You have no idea what I'm capable of." He leaned in closer, his voice low and almost mocking. "I've been watching you. I know every secret you've been hiding. And you're not going to get away from me. Not now. Not ever." I tried to back away, but something in Luke's eyes told me that this wasn't over. It was only just beginning. Jason and I stood together, but I could see the cracks in our foundation. The trust that had once held us together was slipping away, and no matter how hard we fought, I wasn't sure we could ever rebuild it. Luke's words echoed in my mind as we left his apartment. "This isn't over, Emily. Not by a long shot." I didn't know what he meant, but I had a feeling that whatever came next would be far worse than anything I had already endured. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Stay tuned, because what comes next will be the most shocking twist of all. I thought I knew what fear was, but nothing had prepared me for what was coming. Luke was like a shadow that loomed over every moment, every decision, every part of my life. I had thought we were done, that confronting him would finally put an end to his twisted games. But that was a lie I told myself. The worst was yet to come. After that meeting at his apartment, where he made his threats and revealed his true nature, I felt more broken than ever. Jason and we had tried to patch things up, tried to put our lives back together. But there was no escaping the damage Luke had caused. He had dug into our lives, into our minds, and there was no way to heal what he had torn apart. Every moment since then had felt like I was walking on a tightrope, unsure of when I'd fall, unsure of what would break first, the marriage I had once cherished or the fragile peace I had fought so hard to salvage. But the worst part? I couldn't stop thinking about Luke. I hated him. I feared him. But I still couldn't shake the grip he had on me. His words, his gaze, everything he had done to me, it had left a scar I couldn't erase. I tried to ignore the texts, the cryptic messages that kept coming, each one worse than the last. But deep down, I knew something bigger was coming. And when it arrived, I wouldn't be ready. Then it happened. I was sitting in my living room with Jason one evening, trying to talk about how we could fix things, when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. It was late, and the last thing I wanted was an interruption. But when I opened the door, I froze. There was no one there. Just a small, unmarked package lying on the doorstep. My heart sank. I had seen packages like this before, ones that Luke had sent. My hands shook as I picked it up, almost afraid to open it, to see what horrors awaited inside. I brought it inside and tore it open, praying that it wouldn't be something that would send my life spiraling further into chaos. Inside was a photo. A photo of me. It was from the fitness event, the same event where I had kissed Luke. But there was something else. A message scrawled across the back of the photo. It wasn't a simple note. It was a warning. Still think you're in control? You can run, but you can't hide. I'll always be watching. The room spun around me. My breath caught in my throat, and I couldn't stop my hands from shaking as I looked at the photo again. Luke had always been watching. He had always been one step ahead of me. And now it was clear he wasn't going to let me go. He was never going to let me go. I turned to Jason, the man I had hurt more than anyone else, and I could see the same fear in his eyes. He had always suspected something wasn't right. But this was a different level. A new kind of hell that I had dragged him into. We need to end this. Now, Jason said, his voice tight with anger. But even in his rage, I could see the cracks, the doubt in his eyes. Could he ever forgive me? Could we ever truly heal? I didn't have an answer. I didn't have any answers anymore. Luke wasn't just a man who had crossed boundaries. He was a storm, a force that had shattered everything in its path, and now he was closing in. I could feel the walls closing in on me, the pressure building, suffocating me from all sides. Every choice I had made, every mistake, had led me here, and I wasn't sure there was any way out. Jason and I decided to confront Luke once and for all. We couldn't keep living in fear. We couldn't keep pretending that we were okay when we were both falling apart inside. But when we walked into that final confrontation, nothing could have prepared me for what came next. Luke was waiting for us. But this time, there was no cocky smirk, no sense of superiority. He was different, darker, colder. His eyes were full of something I hadn't seen before. It wasn't just manipulation anymore. It was something far worse. I warned you, didn't I? Luke's voice was low, almost whispering. You should have listened. But you're too late now. Jason stepped forward, fists clenched, but Luke held up a hand, stopping him in his tracks. You think you can take me down? You think you can stop this? You have no idea what you're up against. I could see the fear in Jason's eyes, and it made my stomach turn. But what happened next shattered everything I thought I knew. Luke revealed something so dark, so twisted, that it left me breathless. I didn't just choose you, Emily, he said, his smile cruel and knowing. You were never just a target. You were a piece of a much bigger plan. And you played right into my hands. You've always been part of this. Part of me. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. What did he mean? What was he talking about? Before I could react, Luke pulled out a file, a thick folder, and tossed it onto the table. Inside were photos, documents, and notes. Evidence of my entire life, everything I had ever done. But there was something else. There, staring back at me, was a photo of Jason. And beside it, a note that chilled me to the core. You think this ends with you? It doesn't. It never does. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't just about me anymore. This wasn't about a man who had manipulated my feelings and destroyed my marriage. This was something far bigger than I could ever have imagined. Luke had been planning this all along, pulling strings I never knew existed, using me as a pawn in a game I hadn't even realized I was playing. Luke wasn't just obsessed with me. He had been orchestrating a whole web of destruction, and I was the centerpiece. But Jason wasn't innocent either. He had been pulled into this game from the beginning. It was all so much worse than I had imagined. I wanted to scream, to run, but there was no way out. No way to fix this. The truth was more horrific than anything I could have ever imagined. But Luke wasn't finished. He hadn't shown us everything. His smile twisted as he dropped the final bombshell. I could destroy you both. I could destroy everything you've ever worked for. But that's not what I want. No, Emily, what I want is something more. He leaned in closer, his breath cold against my ear. I want to see you break. And I will. Piece by piece. Jason grabbed my hand, pulling me away from him. But Luke's voice echoed in my mind. This isn't over, Emily. This is only just beginning. My life, our lives, had been shattered by a man who had manipulated us, controlled us, and now, it seemed, he wasn't about to let us go. As I looked at Jason, I knew that we were both in too deep. The battle for our lives, our futures, had only just begun. But what came next? The twists, the betrayals, the consequences, everything was about to explode. You won't believe what happens next. Stay tuned, because the next chapter is going to be even more shocking.